towards a sustainable publishing industry in Africa. Please give a special Ake welcome to our guests, Servio Gbadamosi, Lola Shoneyin, and William Tsuma, and our host, Wanjiru Koinange.
Vibes on vibes on vibes. That's how we do at Ake, right? I'm loving the audience. That last panel fire. Well done. That's a tough act to follow, but we will try. This is the Ake Arts and Book Festival 2023. My name is Wanjiru Koinange, and I welcome you to my panel, very important panel discussion with Lola, Servio, and William, as you have heard. And because we're gonna get to know what these incredible human beings do, I'm gonna start by asking some quick fire questions so you can know what they don't do when they're working, like outside of office hours. So the whole point of quickfire is you can't think about the answer, just say what comes onto your mind first. William, you'll answer first, and we'll walk down the line. You guys ready? Mics on.
Okay.
I like to play games. I've recently gotten into the habit of playing games on stage. I want to make it my thing now. So, quickfire. William, yes. Would you rather have the power to time travel to the past or to the future?
To the past.
Aha. Lola?
Past.
Servio?
Future.
Aha. Okay. One odd, one out. Second question. Would you rather live in a world without technology or a world without art?
Oh.
William?
Without technology.
Lola?
Definitely without technology.
Well, I agree with them.
Me too. That's why we're on this panel together. We're all aligned. Number 3, would you rather be a master of every musical instrument or speak every language fluently?
Oh. Speak every language using an instrument.
These are the guys who failed exams because they did answer the question. I see what you did there, Lola.
I'd like to be able to play every language.
I love it. Servio.
Maybe to be able to sing in every language now.
And this is why we're discussing the creative economy. That is some creativity right there. Final quickfire question. William, would you rather have the ability to read minds or to see into the future?
Read minds.
Read minds.
Read minds.
I'll go with the future.
You're a future guy. Our panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Thank you for being great sports. Okay. Let's get into the business. We're discussing the steps we need to take, practical steps, I hope, towards a more sustainable publishing industry. As a writer myself, this is very close to my heart, and everybody on stage here is an author in their own right. I'm going to start with you, our lovely host, Lola, and the reason we are gathered. I am continuously fascinated by all of the arms you have in all the parts of the publishing industry. There's nothing you haven't done. So you know this industry well. So I want to ask, my first question would be to you, is how would you assess the state of the creative economy with regards to publishing and writing in Africa, but specifically in Nigeria as well?
Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to the lovely audience. There's something I have to say very quickly. This is a trick panel, right? I wanted to have William, to have him on a panel with me because I wanted to say publicly how grateful I am and many of us are going to be for the support that he has given us. And so you move around the world, I move around the world, especially the African continent and my own country. Everywhere you go now, people are talking about the creative economy, the creative sector. But you find that when they do have panelists discussing the creative economy, they have filmmakers, they have musicians. Very rarely do they invite publishers. And it seems to me like they've just kind of lost their significance almost. Whereas, given how important storytelling is to us on the continent and how empowering the way we tell stories will be, and the way that we have been telling stories is currently, it just seems to be a big shame. So I go around basically wailing and crying about that. And when I spoke to him, I managed to convince him. So you'll remember when we had the Nigerian Jubilee Fellows, right? Which is kind of where they're put together by the UNDP. And they're there, they've been in training for 2 days, trying to understand rights within an African context and being taught by some of our lovely tutors. That's William. That's William that made that happen. And I just want you to know how grateful I am. And I'm also saying it in case there are other potential supporters in the audience who can follow, who can support what we're trying to do. In terms of, and I hope that sheds a light also on what the current state of publishing is. We used to have a really vibrant publishing industry. However, I have to say that it was largely run by international, they were international publishing houses. So in the 60s and 70s, from Macmillan to Evans Brothers to Heinemann to Oxford University Press, we had them all. They were all in Ibadan, printing books, publishing really interesting stuff. Then along came the military era. And apart from the damage that was done to the actual writers themselves, many of them just had to leave the country for their own survival. It also resulted in real damage being done to the publishing industry. And it took almost 20 years for us for many sort of young people to now decide that they want to kind of bring that back. We tend to call them new age publishers. Many of them are independent publishers who are not solely focused on scholarly or academic publishing, but are actually doing stuff within the creative side. And one of them is Servio, who is currently based in Ibadan and doing incredible things.
Thank you, Servio. We're going to come to you. I learned talking to Lola this afternoon that Ibadan is it is the birthplace of the literary industry in Nigeria. So in the same question to you, but more in the context of Ibadan, what has it been like to be inside the nucleus and to witness all of this change that Lola has just described? Could you maybe reflect on that a little bit?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here to be part of this incredible story that has been on for about 11 years now. Kudos to Lola and the rest of the team. Okay, I was born in Ibadan, and I have lived there for most of my life. When I write poetry largely, and sometimes I write short stories too. I put together a first manuscript, I think, around 2004. And I went around publishing houses. There's that inexperience, naivety that you have as a young person who has just written something you believe in so much. You are so eager to share it with the world. So I found out, these are the leading publishing houses. I've read books from these publishers. So I went around shoving my manuscript in their faces. And that experience was so strange for me because of the feedback I got. Nobody was interested in it. And it was poetry. Everybody was telling me, nobody reads poetry. Maybe you should try a novel. Maybe go and write a textbook. That is what the market wants. Every year where there's a guaranteed market, we know that school children are going to resume and there will be recommended texts for them to read. So uh, that experience, of course, I also tried to reach out to publishers in Lagos, traveling back and forth. Uh, it led me into maybe my first experience of depression and hopelessness, because I just couldn't process it. Like, so, but I was also an undergraduate at that point in time, and from having a small literary group on campus, we would talk about this. I found out that I wasn't the only person having that kind of experience. And we all came together and said, okay, we would all begin to buy newspapers on specific days of the week where they have a literature section, literary arts, literature reviews. And we will pull resources together. I would buy this on Friday, buy The Guardian. Some other person would buy The Guardian on Sunday. And, you know, there was also the Sun newspapers, Post Express. Then there was also New Age newspapers that had very good literary reviews at that point. So we would pull resources together, buy these things, and that's how we developed, you know, we sustained that interest for that time. And then we began to say, okay, what can we do differently? How can we, first of all, help ourselves before we can begin to say, look at what other opportunities exist out there? So being in Ibadan and putting this together, I have had the good fortune of working with a lot of like minds. Sometimes I look back at some of the things that we have done and achieved, and they don't make sense to me. And I wonder how they believed in me because some of those things don't make sense. I didn't even know what I was saying. It was just raw passion. And somebody says, oh, okay, I think I can stay with you on this. I think we can work together on this. And again, being in Ibadan, there is that weight of history, because you understand the city you live in. You understand its history, how pivotal it has been to the development of not just publishing, but the intellectual capital of the country. So there's that burden and that weight of expectation. And we, from time to time, we try to adjust to it. And because we know that, yes, we are continuing the tradition in a different vein, not in the same way that it was done before, but we are going to keep it alive. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that. I think there's always room for some positive nostalgia and and tweaking the nostalgia to fit the current state. William, when I was researching you, I found out that you like to experiment, which is one of my favorite things. I will experiment with everything, and you're currently heading up a very important experiment, your words, not mine, at the UNDP, where you're trying to inject conversations and players in the creative economy into development speak. Can we always look at the way to solve problems socially and culturally through the lens of creative professionals? What are you learning in this experimentation about the state of the publishing industry? And you can speak to Nigeria, but also to the continental context.
Thank you, Wanjiru, and good afternoon, everyone. I told Lola that I'll put her on the spot, and she beat me to it, but I'll still put her on the spot anyway. So I'll detour to your question through Lola. So on the 29th of June, right? So I get this message from a good friend who says, you know, there's somebody you need to meet. And you know, coffee is always a good thing. So I tell somebody, you know what, let's have coffee. Do you know what I was expecting? I'd stalked her, of course. So one thing that I've learned to do is, because I've got trust issues, I don't meet strangers, right? So I stalked her, checked her up online, who's this, checked her up on LinkedIn, began following her randomly on Twitter. She was somewhere, right? So we had this back and forth at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. we're like, why are we DMing each other at 4 a.m.? Anyway, we meet up on that day, and anyone who knows Lola knows the passion she has, right? What's your name? We get to know 2 minutes later. It's as if we've known each other for so long. So, and I wrote it down, Lola, so I'm going to say this. So she talks about she wants to set up a book revolution, right? You know what I mean? It's a revolution for Lola everywhere, right? So a book revolution there is a homegrown strategy, big words, to stimulating a publishing ecosystem. I'm like, okay, by building the capacity and creating opportunities for the next generation, and then now this comes. That's when I knew we've got a problem. She then goes ahead and says, and I'm writing down, right, because I know that I'm not as clever as she is, and I don't have the memory that she does have, so I said, let me put it down. So she says she wants to produce 100 well-edited, high-quality picture books for 3 to 6 year olds in 24 months, right? And these books will be written and illustrated by Nigerians between the age of 18 and 30. And they have to also be printed in Nigeria. And for me, as a development practitioner, those were a lot of messages in there. So first of all, 18 and 30, right? Targeting 3 and 6 year olds. So that's really formative years, but also printed in Nigeria. Now, as a visitor in Nigeria, I've always assumed this is the home of publishing. This is the home of, when I grew up, the textbooks we read, those literature books, were Nigerian books. So, Lola, why do you want to do this? And I think that's where the journey began. So from a development perspective, many a times when we think about publishing and literature, we don't look at it as an economy, right? And I think that's the danger. We don't look at it as a sector that can create jobs, foster, build livelihoods, put money in the pockets of young people. We look at it basically as a tool of instruction. I had my brother talk about textbooks. Many a times when we think about access to education, we think about textbooks. But we don't look at publishing and creative writing as an economy, an industry that we can put a figure to it from a GDP perspective. And I think that's a journey towards the development conversation beginning. In the meantime, UNDP has been grappling about what do we do with this generation of young people who are breaking out of university every year. Statistics roughly say 1.2 million per year out of tertiary and high institutions. How do we start demonstrating to this generation that publishing as part of a creative economy could actually be a pathway for career advancement and a livelihood at the same time? And I think that's when the conversation began about this book revolution and a creative lab of now doing several things. One, bringing back the culture of reading to young people, but at the same time demonstrating to this generation that you can actually be able to write stories, and that can become a career path, but can also be a pathway for entrepreneurship, and that's a development story. And so the reason why I'm bringing this back to Lola and responding to your question is that it is not about UNDP, but it's about people with vision like Lola who are actually educating us on something that we have for a long time misunderstood or know very little about. When I met with Lola, basically what she says is that she wants young Nigerians to write stories for children, and she wants those stories published in Nigeria. So that means she wants to build an ecosystem of talent on an infrastructure of publishing that is Nigeria owned. And for me, that's the epitome of development, Wanjiru.
Fantastic. And shout out to Lola's incredible vision, because we wouldn't be sat here today if it wasn't for your vision. And now I'm going to put you on the spot with this vision of yours. I told you I like to play games on stage. So, and I want to do this with you as well, Servio, but I want to start with you, Lola. Please close your eyes. You're going to take us on a bit of a journey, and I want you to imagine, and you're welcome to close your eyes as well in the audience so Lola doesn't feel shy. So please imagine and describe to us what your life looks like when this industry that we are all working so hard to shape and reshape and create is at its best. So you can pick whatever hat you want to wear. You're either a writer, or you're a festival director, you're a publisher, but I just want us to all leave this room with a very clear and vivid picture of what success looks like for Lola in all of the work that you're doing.
Success looks like a situation where we've managed to successfully establish an ecosystem and an industry that functions. And I want to say here also that these things are never about me. I have very little interest in being one of the movers and shakers when that time comes that things are really blossoming. But I understand that people need models. You can't depend or rely on politicians. I often say that creative people are the last bastion of the truth, right? And I see my role as an individual as somebody who can perhaps just show younger people what is possible. And I love the fact that I'm a woman. And I love the fact that I can make hard things look easy. Yeah? It's very important to me. When I do it, it's strategic, right? With Ake Festival, the truth is, it's my journey that does make these things easy. The fact that I was a school teacher for so many years, rising to a deputy principal, pastoral. So I used to, Ake is a walk in the park, because I used to program for an entire school. Like subjects, you've got kids, this one doesn't offer physics, this one, how do you move them around? So these things are all skills that I have gained over the years, and I'm very happy to now use them as a catalyst so that the things that matter to me can start happening. And of course, publishing books, literacy, those are very key things, not just for the commercial angle, but without our stories, we are nothing. We are nothing. And I see this, and I often see our government, then they don't seem to get that. So I've kind of given up on trying on state, expecting the state to support this work or to be the one that's kind of driving it. With creative stuff, it's normally down to individuals. That's the way it works on this continent. That's the way it's been for ages. So if I have to kind of be one of those individuals, I'm very happy to do it because it's not work for me. I love doing it, you know? I love doing it, and I know that it's going to have impact, and I'm very patient. So the future for me is where I can sit back in my home in Ilishon, right? With a wrapper and my breasts exposed. Probably drinking the fattest gin and tonic you've ever seen, but watching, reading on social media, watching on TV, what the generation that has followed me has been able to achieve.
Ashe, I want to, before we come to you, Servio, I just want to touch on something you've said there about making this work look easy. That is so important, my dear audience, because when I'm not writing, I restore public libraries in Nairobi, and it's a lot of hard work to fundraise for those precious buildings. But let me tell you, one thing I will not do is lead with struggle, right? Because if we show libraries as being a place of, oh, you know, kids, poor kids, they can't read, they can't do what. We host a gala every year, and we have successfully put together the most glamorous Nairobi event inside a library. Because it's important that kids see these careers of ours as glamorous, as economically viable. Fake it if you have to. That's right. Because in lieu of that, what we're doing is relegating ourselves to like hobbies that are maybe if you're lucky, they will make you money. No. I'm getting so sick and tired of conversations around the creative economy not revolving around the economy. It's money. We need to lead with glamour. We need to lead with the fact that these things are easy. Lie to them that they're easy. When they come inside, we'll be like, okay, we lied a little bit. It's not that easy, but nothing that is worth it ever is. And I really, really applaud that because we have to trick them into doing this work. Okay, Servio, it's your turn to imagine. So what does this utopia look like for you?
Okay, Uh, I'll start by saying that a lot of some of this imagination, I have lived in it. I I have experienced it. I am experiencing it. So it's more real to me now. There are times when I can almost reach out and touch it. And it's because this started on nothing else but passion. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No connections, even to the writers. The only connection to writers that I had were through their works that I interacted with. But from a group of young boys and girls, undergraduate boys and girls, who just have a passion for writing, and then who discovered the challenges in the industry, and then who were saying, what can we do differently? How do we help ourselves first? And then help lots of other people out there who are also experiencing this. We've come to learn a lot about the industry. What was its history? Where did it start from? How did we arrive at this juncture? And in understanding all of that, that wealth of knowledge, that wealth of experience that we have accumulated through the years has helped us in making crucial decisions. Because every day you go out, you interact with people, young people now, and I don't think I'm so young anymore, but I used to be a lot younger than this, right? But, you know, I look at how much the people before us have achieved, and I look at what we are doing now. But if I compare what we are doing now with what is to come, we have not even started scratching the surface at all. We are nowhere near it. You come across people doing fantastic things with words in the fields of, even in the fields of art. And it all then boils down to a question of capital, capacity, building, and all. Because as an independent publisher, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do. You come across 20, 50, 20, 30, 40 good manuscripts, fantastic manuscripts that you can take on, but then you look at your bank. You look at your bank and you try to figure out the economics of it all. There are those books that you do that don't turn a profit in years. There are those ones that you've almost even forgotten about, and then something sparks one day, and then there's a demand for 100 copies, 50 copies, 200 copies, here and there, and it moves. Now, that is dead capital to you. You've actually cancelled it off your books. But again, in this industry, you cannot base your activities on past glory, on past efforts. Regardless of the challenges, you have to find a way to keep churning out new works, even if you are in debt. Even if you are in debt. Because if you don't come up with new publications, after a while, people begin to forget you. And then what happens to those writers? What happens to those stories that the world would never or may never get to hear about? And so it's a weight of responsibility, but one that I bear with a very keen understanding of what that responsibility is. And for anybody that knows me, I really don't go out talking about what I do, but these books go out. These books go out. You get emails, you get cold calls from people in different parts of the world, and they say, I came across this, I saw you did this. Oh, okay, what's possible? What are you working on next? And you try to pull all of these resources together to see what's the next project that you can take on. So it's having that understanding of not just what the mission is, but also what the future holds for the industry. And I think that maybe in another decade or two, I don't think it's, we'll keep working, right? We'll keep networking, we'll keep synergizing, we'll keep trying to do what we can to grow the ecosystem within our country, because I bet you, there are pockets of goodness everywhere. There are people doing fantastic work, either as creators or as publishers or as printers, here and there, here and there. But being able to link all of them to a network, an ecosystem that feeds each other, that connects, that is the challenge. That is the challenge. But it is not a challenge that we can't see the solution through it. We're experiencing it, and with sweat and blood, right? But also with a lot of energy and passion, we are walking our way through the jungle. So I would want to see. It's hard for me to imagine this because I'm living it. Because I'm living.
It must be very
and
nice.
I'm experiencing what's possible.
Thank you. It must be very nice to be living the dream. William, over lunch we were chatting, and Genevieve, who I believe is still in the room, said something that I wasn't going to repeat on stage, but now I think I am. And she said that the Nigerian publishing industry is on its knees. And I stopped. I'm like, whew, let me take that in, because as a Kenyan, I have grown up looking and aspiring towards this industry. First of all, in the room, do you think that's true? Is the Nigerian publishing industry truly on its knees? Yes, it looks like we have a divided room. That's a bit of a moment. Even now saying it again, I have grief in my heart. And I guess my question is, and I'll ask all of you if you believe that it's true, but William, why do you think, because I'm not sure the visual arts, the fashion industry, the film industry are in the same position that the literature industry are. So why does it seem like the literature space or the literature industry is consistently being overlooked? What's happening? Are we not pitching the right guys? Are we not investing in the value chain enough? What's going on?
That's a good question, and Genevieve, you've just gotten me into trouble. And I think I touched on this a little bit, that many a times when we think about publishing and when we think about the creativity that comes out of literature and publishing, we actually think about textbooks and schools, right? And I remember growing up, that's what we had. So you had literature books, but they were linked to academics. So that meant that I read a book because I had an academic responsibility to achieve, and which translated into an academic grade. I didn't link that to an economy, to an industry, to a livelihood, or to income. That's where it ended. Everything else was then a hobby. I loved reading stories, and I loved reading, so that's where it ended. So I never, growing up, and I'm just using my own story now, connected to the Nigerian context, from the most that I know is then I never thought about the back end that makes all that possible. Now, truth of the matter is that many a times when we have a conversation on the creative economy in Nigeria, when you think about the verticals or the value chains that pop up, I'll be very honest, until I began having conversations with Lola, you will see film, see music, see fashion, right? And then you'll see arts and crafts. To be very honest with you, that's where it ends, right? Now, many a times in those conversations around the creative industry and around cultural expressions, you rarely found publishing. And whenever you did, it was linked to writers of music, script writers of film, but not necessarily publishing as an industry. And that's why this for me was very interesting, because I love the word ecosystem, right? An ecosystem basically is a realization that there is something that connects different parts. So if you look at a house and the role that different rooms in a house play, but when I think about what Genevieve was saying is that the absence of these conversations in mainstream creative economy platforms presents the impression that the sector on its own, while visible as soft power and what it represents, it's invisible in mainstream conversations. And that's why many a times it's not as evident as if you think about film or music or fashion or arts and craft.
Okay, Lola?
Any industry that relies on the passion of a few people is on its knees. That's the truth. And it's because the infrastructure is missing and the ecosystem is wonky. So I can probably name maybe 15 independent publishers in Nigeria. Keyword there is independent. So there are lots of people publishing textbooks, scholarly material, but in terms of independent publishers who are interested in publishing quality fiction, maybe books for children, there are very few, right? And if anything happens to those individuals who are driving those publishing houses, everything is going to collapse. And that's why I've become a little bit obsessed with how do we build a system that actually works, and if it is possible. One great thing about the way my mind works is that I'm not afraid of failure. I fail many times, but knowing that it's okay for me to fail and telling myself that means that I can really experiment, right? And within publishing, a lot of people think it's you write a story and you give it to a printer. Even my printer in Shomolu now calls himself a publisher. Yeah. He calls himself a publisher now. When he told me, he gave me his card and it's printing, DI and publisher. I was like, okay. But publishing is more than printing, as you know. We need editors, copy editors, line editors, designers, layouts people, the people doing covers, booksellers, marketers. You know, it's a massive world out there. And I keep thinking to myself that this, our big Nigeria of over 200 million people, we haven't even been able to get that right outside academic publishing. So the only way to get it right is to ensure that we're training the right people, especially young people, because they're going to carry this forward. I'm 50 years old. If I'm lucky, I get another 30 years. You know what I mean? And I'm very conscious of that. And I don't want to spend the rest of my days fighting and using my head to hit brick walls. I need more young people to get behind me and just go ahead too, go past me. But my other concern is also our place in the world. And I have been very lucky. I've been able to travel a lot, both as a writer, as a publisher, even as a bookseller, and as a festival organizer. And I know what I see around the world. And I spend a lot of my time just being really envious, especially because this, our Nigeria, the amount of talent that is here is ridiculous. Do you understand? And I'm not even being, I'm trying to say, up Nigeria. No, I'm saying the people I meet every day, people who come and say, listen, I want to do this. And all I can think about is, why did I not marry a millionaire so I can sponsor this? Do you know what I mean? I had to go and marry a doctor who is the child of another poor writer. So one of the things that bug me, right? I am a little bit territorial about African stories, and over the last 13 years, my experience as an author has been very much about, questioning what success translates to. What does it mean to the average writer? And success to many of us in Nigeria is being published in the West. And that is part of what is destroying us. And I know it's rich for me to say that because I was published in the West. But I've seen the issues. And I've seen what sometimes looks a little bit like, it's almost like literary colonialism, when your talent is just kind of mined and suddenly it's out of reach for your own people. They can't access books anymore. They're too expensive. But other people elsewhere are loving the books and reviewing them on Amazon everywhere. And I really despise that.
Me too. Yeah.
Right? One of the reasons Ake is so important for me, and I've heard it from DK just today, I've heard it with Omolola as well. I really feel that when you are loved on your continent, the flavor, the texture of the love is different.
It hits different. It does hit different.
It feels different. When you get validation and feedback from Africans, it feels different. And we all need it, right? And that's another link in the chain for us to be able to have these fora where we can talk about our own work. We're not spending half of the discussion providing context so that our people from the West understand what we're saying. I can launch into it and do koro eye with Africans. I'll just say, when I say it, they get it. And like I'm saying, that's important too, right? So, for me, I can't remember the question, but...
It's okay because we have to go to Q&A soon.
Are we in Q&A
We're in
already?
Q&A, we're actually
I'm sorry.
But before we
I'm
we
always
go,
preaching.
Oh, it's okay, girl. This is your stage. You can preach all you like. We're here for you. Questions soon, but before we go into questions, as a writer who made the mistake of selling all her rights to a UK publisher and then insisting that they give them back to me when I realized, these guys will never promote this book the way I can, although an African publisher can. And I got my rights back and published myself on the continent. It is possible. It's not, you can come back. I've made that mistake, but once you know the value of the thing that you're sitting on, and because they know the value as well, which is why they want it in the first place, so you must be able to get your rights back and then talk to Lola about how to get them published on the continent, or speak to me. I'm happy to help. But it is possible, and we have to begin to just do these things with our full chest and understand that they want your content because it's good. So stop having this imposter syndrome of, but I'm so lucky to be published. No, they're the ones who are lucky.
Shiro, very important. It's all right to aspire to be published anywhere, right? But the rights for this continent, keep them.
Keep them.
And just say that, no, I'm not giving you these rights.
Yes.
And wait for an African publisher.
Yeah.
We are working on being able to also say, great, this book, we can publish it here as well. There aren't many of us, but there is a growing number.
And there's many in this room right now. Right now. And if we do it that way, we can pay the editors and the designers and all of those people, we can pay them here. And then now we're talking about an economy, not a hobby, right? Questions, please. Very many hands. Wonderful.
I'll try and make it very fast because I have 3 questions and I think they're all interconnected. I know, trust me, you can time me 60 seconds. We're talking about building ecosystems, right? And you had mentioned something about the role of libraries. So I wanted to talk about, the role of libraries, especially the way we have it in Nigeria, because your reference was not Nigerian libraries. I spent my childhood in libraries, so they hold a special place in my heart, and it's just devastating to see that, the resources that are taken for granted when I was a child, like it's so many kids, I see them nowadays, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Secondly was the role of schools, right? Because, we had mentioned something about, I was talking to her about the fact that the problem is that a lot of people are not aware of the job opportunities present in publishing, right? So, case in point, I love books, but also I'm somebody that when I read, I find it very hard to picture characters. So I tend to buy a lot of character art. I like having them so I can see the character art as I'm reading the book. And I had a colleague, I was like, oh, this is very pretty. And he's like, who did this? And I'm like, oh, this art is on Instagram. He's like, wait, people can do that? And I'm like, yeah, people can do that. That is legit a business, because guess what? Some people find it hard to visualize characters, and they need character art, which, you know, publishers are getting into. So that's another thing for artists. And then the third thing was the role of technology and how that can boost accessibility. You know, you were talking about textbooks, and I just remembered, because I also work in advertising, and there was this Cannes, white people, whatever. Well, yes, there was this Cannes thing whereby in some country, they had basically put textbooks on SIM cards to be accessible. So you don't need to have internet connections. You could have all your entire books in one SIM. You put it in those old Nokia 3310, and you can read your books just scrolling through, and they could give it out for free because SIM cards are practically very inexpensive. So those were the three things and the intersectionalities of them that I wanted to ask about. Thank you.
Those are all statements. I didn't hear a question there, did I? No.
Well, she asked about libraries.
About libraries.
And let me tell you something. I had given up on the idea of libraries in Nigeria, because what I ask myself all the time is, would I send my daughter to that place, right? Or my son? And a lot of the time, the answer is no. Then I started to question, is it even possible for a library to work? Will people feel safe? And then I went to Nairobi and visited Eastland's library. And my expectations were very low. I cannot lie, I'm sorry. When I was going there, I was thinking, these girls that like to speak plenty English, we'll see let's go and see what they have created. And I was blown away. So I immediately did a little documentary. I actually spoke to some of the people there on camera with my phone, just asking them, why are you here? What are you doing? How is this place working for you? And it changed my entire view of the functionality of public libraries. So much so that I've been trying to get their blueprints, because in my hometown, I'm thinking it might be good to just start with something tiny. The existing structures are problematic. Most of the libraries are full of textbooks, actually. Yeah. I don't know if you've been to a library in Nigeria recently. So we have to start thinking, okay, so how do we get books into those libraries? And I've been having great conversations. You introduced me to Book Aid, yes, and we're about to do something. I think we're trying to bring in about 80,000 books into Nigeria. But along with that, we must have Nigerian material.
Exactly. We don't have a publishing industry without libraries. It is impossible. We call in Nairobi, my co-founder, who's over there taking video, we refer to libraries as palaces for the people, because it's the only space where you can go and you don't have to pay anything, be anyone, know anyone, to access information, to access storytelling. And all of these stories we want to write for our generations to come, they're going to live forever in libraries. So I don't think there's an industry without libraries.
And you're using technology as well for the archiving.
Exactly. Okay, Kina had a question.
Thank you, Servio, for the history on Ibadan. The reach of Ibadan is huge. My mother, first literary workshop as a budding writer was in Ibadan, and I mean, that was way before I was born. She was like 19, and it was so formative to her as a writer. My question has to do with different platforms for publishing. So I love books, and the furthest I've ventured out is audiobooks. My teenage son, he's 17, doesn't like physical books. He will read the books that I buy, but his passion is anime, manga. And even anime, manga, he doesn't want the physical book. So they have platforms on Telegram. Some are free, some I pay $15 a month for. Like whether he's in boarding school or not, I just pay and he catches up. And some are a limited series, so they will publish, it has an end, the story has an end. Some of them are like soap operas, they never end. Some of them they will dump the entire book at once and some of them it's suspenseful. I tell you that as somebody who loves books, it took me a long time to accept that my child wasn't holding a book all the time. So finally, I mean, I got on board, and these works are well edited, well drawn, and when I tell you that every time I'm so jealous of the crowds, the young people. There are Ghanaians on there, there are Nigerians, there are Kenyans. And some of them are self-published by the artist, some by actual publishing houses. In Japan, in Europe, in US, there is even one that comes out of Latin America. And so what I want to say, as blasphemous as it sounds to me myself, is that when we are talking about sustainable, we need to really look at this, because I'm like, sometimes I think, like I'm paying, at this point I pay like $40 a month. And imagine, I won't pay $40 a month even. But he's a kid, so I'll do it. Lots of them. And so and it's not just the anime, I call them anime manga, they are like farms. But when we also, even for writers like in the United States, people who are self-publishing their works, who are doing genre fiction, who have huge following, again, they farm out the work to editors, to copy ed. So the books come out, but they have a following on YouTube. This is all publishing. So we need to take advantage of it. So that was my question. My last thing is, Lola, Rana and I, that you are the queen of petty and shade. When you said that you make hard things look easy, yeah, I feel you. Yeah, we got it.
Servio.
I just wanted to say further evidence that the Nigerian publishing industry is on its knees is the fact that one of the most important digital publishing platforms, Okada Books, is going to close down on the 30th of November. So of course it's on its knees. What's the next thing? We tried to introduce One Read as well. It was really, really difficult. Really difficult. So how can we look, it's only money that can bring these things back. And
That's
it's
what I
the thing
said.
those of us in publishing is the one thing we don't have.
But there are rich people in the room who can solve that, right? If you're a rich person in the room, can you put your hand up now?
We want to know you.
We want to know you, please. Look at them hiding. Yeah, you guys were looking down. We're coming. We're coming for your money. Servio, you want to respond to Kina?
Okay. Yes, first I would say that the industry is on its knees, right? But I would also want to say that I have what I would like to describe as practical optimism. Practical optimism, if there's such a thing, is the fact that, yes, it's on its knees, but out of that, I would want to imagine the industry being on its knees as the industry going through the process of childbirth. And yes, the labor pangs are there. It's, you also know, like the way the Yoruba people describe the process of childbirth. You know that there's a lot of danger, and it could swing either way. It could swing either way. But just that thread of possibility that exists in this situation, as unpleasant as it is, as terrible, you can use the worst words you can find to describe it, and you will be correct, right? But it's important work that cannot be left undone. And yes, I'm sure I could be making a lot more money than this. There are more meaningful things I can do with my life. And I have tried a number of times. I have tried a number of times. But every time I leave, there's that hollowness there's that emptiness. Yes, you might make the money. You might be able to, make a few trips to your choice destinations and all, be able to fulfill some of your dreams and all. But there's that space that nothing else seems to be able to fill. And so, with that understanding, a lot of the people that we have worked together, they are scattered now, all in different parts of the world. MFA program, this PhD in creative writing, in that, everywhere. And for a while, I thought that it was all going to be a loss. Like when you've had the good fortune of working with some of the best minds, and this guy wants to stay here. He wants to continue this important work. But he also needs to grow a spine because life is tough. So you part ways and then you let him go. And in the moment, if you just live for a moment in that moment, it looks like a loss. But now I'm seeing it differently. I'm seeing it differently because some of them are now better placed. And some of them come back to ask questions. What's going on? How do we make inputs into growing this? So initially it looks like a loss, right? But I think at some point there's going to be a harvest. There's going to be a harvest. And we need to continually give. Most of the people that work with me, it's their first time working in publishing. They went to a school, right? They had a different career path in mind. And maybe they tried to get the big jobs, the high-paying jobs and all, and it didn't work out. And then somebody says, there's an opening there. Sure, you consider it instead of just eating our food and wasting your life. And then they come in. And then you see those fantastic ones. It just feels like they were born to do this. Yeah. It feels like they were born to do this. And you wonder, why did it take you so long to make your way here? Right? But even as much as that passion is, there's also that question of sustainability, which is what we have been talking about. And I think that we need to continuously build the network, synergize across industries, across countries, across continents, to build the ecosystem that can help us tell these important stories that we tell and showcase, bake a bigger pie.
Yeah, thank you. Our time is up, but I want to leave with having a passing shot from both Lola and William. How do we get this industry off its knees? We've had build the ecosystem, get the value chain supported at every single kind of point. William, one parting shot, please.
So I think for me, one thing that I really must emphasize that it's almost like the desert, the Death Valley story where it's super dry, the soil is cracking, but one thing always happens when there's a shower called rainfall, right? And suddenly there's this bloom and this color that comes out of the flowers that come out of the ground, because what happens is that there's a seed underneath. So every time I look at Nigeria, what I see, and I think Lola has mentioned, is that the seed is there, the foundation is there, the capacity is there, the talent is there, the infrastructure is there, the legacy exists. And so what we need is to water that. And when Nigeria takes off, the continent takes off. I'm so convinced about that. Nigeria takes off, the world takes off. And I think what we are doing here is an opportunity to galvanize that. Yeah. So the foundation, the slab is there. We just now need to water that. And it's going to take the value chain, the ecosystem that my sister spoke about, because it's an entire value chain that we need to tap into. And the seed is underneath.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you, Lola.
Absolutely correct. We also need people who are willing to be builders. Because we're really starting, we've gone back to the beginning. I founded my first publishing house when I was 23. So I've gone through that journey and I'm back again starting another one. But building, I didn't understand building then, and now I do. And I also understand that anything that's going to work in this country is going to need to be, you have to be willing to be a builder. But it's also such a fantastic opportunity, The fact that you have this field of dreams for you to go in, put the work in, and then hopefully harvest at some point. For me, it's so much motivation, and it gets me very excited. That's it.
I love it. We're going to leave with that note of excitement. Let's approach this revival with reflection, with excitement, with possibility, with potential, because when you're on your knees, it means it's time to pray and to reflect, and then to get up off your knees and get some work done. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.